And so I want you to ask the right questions. Not things like, what should I do? Not things like, what's realistic or what will other people think? None of that matters at this stage. Ask yourself powerful questions like, if next year went really well, really, really well, what would I want to be true? Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, whatever it is that you are celebrating. If you're listening to this around the holidays, this is just one of the rare times of the year where things naturally slow down a bit. Work eases up, there's more time with the family, and for a moment, there's more space to breathe and reflect. And I think this is actually one of the best times to talk about goals, right? Not in a rushed New Year's resolution kind of way, but in a more thoughtful, grounded way. The holidays tend to pull us into gratitude for the people in our lives, for the progress we've made, and even for the lessons that didn't come easily. And I've found that when goals are set from a place of gratitude, that instead of pressure, right, they tend to be better goals, more aligned, more sustainable, and of course, more meaningful as well. So in this episode, I want to talk you through how I think about setting goals for the next year ahead, but also the next decade and sort of some milestones or, some time frames in between. Of course, we'll be talking about money and investing in a way that supports your life and not just your bank account. So you probably agree here that that most people who set their goals will achieve some progress, but the people who review their goals regularly will achieve exponentially more. That's the difference, right? It's not about talent, the intelligence. It's really more about the frequency of review. The more you look at your goals, the more likely you're going to be able to make decisions that actually move toward them, right? So I think it's also important to say here is this is something that's been rattling around in my head for the last decade or so, is that goals aren't just about what you achieve. They're about who you become and whether the life you're building actually works for you, right? And so I think that's huge because if you think about the idea of it's not what we get, it's who we're becoming in the process, then you think about them a little bit different too. So we're not just setting goals, we're looking at how we can set these actions, right? Really a vision for ourselves intentionally, not reactively. And to do this, I have put together this material of goal setting of things that, like I said, I've been using. But I don't want you to take my word for this. I want to talk about. I've put together some perspectives or frames from people I've stolen or borrowed their goal setting processes from and put them all together in a system that I use now and what I want to deliver to you. But I also want to share some frames of thinking before we get into this goal setting so that I can provide some useful tidbits, some aggregation of great thinkers, I think, as well, so that maybe you can think about these things as well while you're doing your own goal setting process, or maybe you choose to use some of the parts that I'll mention shortly here. But here's some people that I think that really have been inspirational and useful. And so I want to pass these on too. And so what's interesting is that when you study high performers across very different domains, from coaching, management, investing, and entrepreneurship, you start to see the same patterns that show up over and over again. And one of those people that I want to mention and I want to start off with here is actually Tony Robbins. If you don't know him, he's been huge in the coaching space. And what he really talks about is identity, values, and state. And so Tony would teach that goals fail when they're disconnected from, identity, values, and emotional state. And his system that he uses, which is called RPM, which is results, purpose, and the massive action plan, RPM framework, starts with why something matters emotionally before ever defining the outcome or that plan. And how this shows up is that goals must align with your core values, right? Core values. If I were to ask you, or if he were to ask you, what's really important in life, then you would probably say a number of things. They would be from, freedom, for family, friends, experiences, adventure, whatever. And you would say, and based on those things, it would be really important that, or it'd be really likely that the things that you were doing really align to those values. Go figure, right? And so your goals must align with those values. Emotional leverage sustains the execution because really the identity or who you're becoming in that process is what's really going to help you to be consistent. So Robbins would say that the goal isn't the goal. It's the standard that you're raising and the identity that you're reinforcing. All right. Another one here is we think about is from that management person here is Peter Drucker, right? The measure what matters guy, right? And measurement and focus. And so Peter Drucker emphasized that effectiveness comes from clarity, prioritization, and measurement. His management philosophy centered on deciding what not to do and aligning effort with those outcomes. And this shows up in clear objectives, right? Things like SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, blah, 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 right? Defined metrics. How do we know we're making progress on this? And focusing on fewer things that matter. So his lens would force you to ask, what is actually moving the needle here and what's just noise? And I'm going to wrap all these things up at the very end here, but I just want to mention a couple more because, again, I think having these different perspectives and how they think about these people, some of these greats, so to speak, are thinking about goals really kind of allow you to tap into not only the credibility of who they achieved and, how their thoughts and perspectives around goal setting, but how they think about things. And so Jeff Bezos, of course, we know, is really about long-term orientation and decision quality, right? He's known for structuring Amazon around long-term thinking, often prioritizing decisions that compound over years rather than optimizing for short-term results. And the way this shows up for him is multi-year time horizons, right? Willingness to look wrong in the short term or being misunderstood is another way that this is spoken about. And another one is focusing on decision quality over speed. Now, I can say personally, bias for action, like moving quickly is really important as well. But the point is speed from this perspective of what does that really mean? And let me qualify this here of, he would say something like, making decisions that only make sense if you're thinking 5 to 10 years out, right? So we need to think about what does that mean long term over short term. And so this is a multi-year approach. Now there's someone else that I've been a big fan of over the last maybe going in 2026. Yeah, I'll say 5 years or so. And his name is Naval Ravikant. And what he really focuses on more, and he's got a lot of really good content out there for, is leverage and time. If you want to dig more into him, he's got a book that someone else wrote, I believe, if I remember correctly, is quite good. The philosophy of him, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. But here's the point. The point is Naval is someone who consistently emphasizes leverage and in the form of capital, money, code, right? You can do it once and it will execute multiple times out. Media, of course, you can say things one time and, if you say it one time and you just publish it to multiple channels, plus it can live for a long time, right? Written word, books, etc., videos, and so forth can live for a long time. And of course, systems. These are mechanisms that allow effort to scale beyond time, right? And so these, the way this shows up is that you want to design goals that decouple income from your hours, right? No one wants to be trading time for money. We want to be doing this for results, right? So that's the point. So invest in skills and assets that compound time and time. So they're going to be growing over time. Of course, we're going to be optimizing for freedom, not just outputs, right? And so he would say things like, he would argue that a good goal increases leverage and not workload, right? And so he's got a lot of really great stuff. Can't say enough good things based on the stuff that I have looked into. So let's move on. All right. I don't want a side tangent there. Other one is Warren Buffett. Of course, we're talking investing podcasts, so we've got to mention Buffett. and he's going to be talking about focus, patience, and saying no, right? So Buffett is known for extreme selectivity, long holding periods, and patience. He has repeatedly said that success comes from avoiding stupidity more than chasing brilliance. And this shows up in goals from the perspective of few high conviction priorities, right? Really believing it. This is the reason why, and I have the reasons, of doing it. Long-term compounding of whatever that capital is, like, long-term time horizons again, right? And the discipline to say no, because you have fewer things, discipline of saying no. And so, one of the things with Buffett would be, number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, see rule number one. So, Buffett's goal to approach to goals would simply be fewer bets, held longer with conviction. And so, the thing to think about here is that these are different domains, different people, different domains, very similar principles, which are clarity, long-term thinking, focus, leverage, and alignment with values. And these perspectives are what we're going to be using to design the goals, of course, for next year, but, visioning for the future as well. Now, I think there's a couple things that are important to kind of make that connection more, to make it emotional for you, right? And these are small tweaks that I hope will impact you to think about these differently. And I think we need to be clear that although this is investing, let's be honest, we don't really care about investing. If investing didn't give us anything, we wouldn't care. It's about providing some kind of input so that we get something greater on the other side, right? Investing is just a tool. What we really care about, what people really care about, is what investing allows us to do. Money is not the goal. Money is the mechanism, right? So with no one really caring about money and caring about the outcomes, when we're setting goals, we don't want to stop at, well, I want more money, or I want, I just want the money, because that is, I'm going to be honest, is kind of short-sighted. And I was there too. And so this is why I want to emphasize this. We want to be asking about what the money unlocks, right? More time freedom, more options, more peace of mind, more experiences with family and friends, more of the ability to say no when you want to, right? More ability to say yes without the stress of whatever it is, of more saying yes to things that are for you and what you want to do in life. Less dependence on a single paycheck or employer, of course. And the other thing is that investing is about removing constraints. The real power of investing is that it reduces financial pressure. The, oh my God, what happens if types of things. And it creates that optionality, right? It gives you leverage over your time, seeing the pattern here, and let your money work harder than you do, which I'm always a fan of. I'm always thinking, can I make my money work harder than I am? Right? Type of question. And of course, that creates leverage, et cetera, et cetera. You get to see how it's all connected here. It's really, really amazing. So let's get into the good stuff. Let's get into the good stuff here. This is where we're finally rubber hitting the road of the goal setting process. All right. Now, before I walk through these steps, if you're like me, you're probably listening to this podcast while you're driving or walking, you're doing something else. And I'm not asking you to do this right now, especially if you're in motion or on the road. I just want to give you a complete process that I use myself, built from the people that I just talked about, including maybe a couple others that are noteworthy, like Jim Rohn or Brian Tracy. Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins, one of his teacher, and Brian Tracy, huge sales leader, tons of goal setting. If you've ever heard of things like Eat the Frog, he's the one that wrote the book on that. And of course, blended with my own experience here so that you can use it when you're able to give it the space and the focus. And so let's get into it. I'm going to walk through this. And I really want this to be useful for you. So step one, create the space. The first thing I want to do is to create the real space, right? This isn't something you're going to be doing between meetings or while you're, running around, scrolling on your phone, right? Or seeing something. Don't just squeeze this in whatever you can. I mean, real uninterrupted time. Block it out. Maybe that's an hour, 60 minutes, 90 minutes on the weekend. Maybe it's early in the morning before anyone else is up. Maybe that's while you're sitting outside. or you can go outside with a notebook, whatever that time is. You should be in a place where your attention can be just on this, right? Without being pulled into 100 directions, right? This isn't going to be a checklist. This is more about having a design section. It's about visioning. And, the reason this matter is simple. You want to have this space so you can design while you're being present, right? You don't want to default into something where you're able to get pulled away because it's going to be about state. And that's really us moving into step 2. So step 1, create the space. Step 2, get in the right state. What does that mean? So after you create the space, the next thing you need to do is get in state before you start thinking and writing about these goals. So what does this mean? Everything we do is affected by our state, our energy, our focus, our mood, if you will. If you've ever finished a really good workout and suddenly felt like you could conquer the world, this is what I'm talking about. You ever had a big win or had a win? Of course, everyone has, small or big, and your confidence just kind of brought you up a little bit, right? Seemed to lift your thinking up. That feeling of clarity, that sense of capability, that's the state that I'm talking about. You want to be in something like that before you start thinking about your next year, before you start thinking about what's next. On the other hand, there are moments when you're tired, your mood is low, you've been staring at the screens all day, or you're just sort of feeling flat. And if you ever try to design your future from that lower energy state, your goals are going to reflect it. Okay. So here's what I want you to do before you write a single thing. I want you to get up. I want you to stretch. I want you to move your body. I want you to take a few walk, or I want you to take a quick walk. I want you to take a few breaths, turn on that music, whatever it is to make you feel powerful. All right. Do something, anything that shifts your energy. Quick movements, jump up and down. This isn't about motivation. It's about accessing your best thinking. And I think it's proof enough. Just like I said, when you're thinking about your wins, you're going to be feeling different. When you're really tired, you really want to you're thinking about what you're going to be doing next year. Probably not. Your state determines your quality of your goals. This isn't rah-rah stuff. This is it's just science, man. It's just basics. So step 3, prime your mind before asking the right questions about what's going on. Now, I opened this already about why I think that end of year is really cool. Christmas time, gratitude, all that kind of stuff. Of course, you can do it at any point in the year. It's the same process. But for those who are maybe a little bit newer to some of the process, this is what we're going to do. Let's focus on what's going on right. So once you've got that space, right, that 69 minutes, whatever, and you're in a good state, here's what you're going to be doing to begin that thinking. The first part is thinking not about what's wrong, because if you're like most of us, especially people who work in tech or solve a lot of hard problems for a living, your brain is really good at scanning for what's broken or what's missing. And that's great at work. But when it comes to envisioning the future, that problem-oriented lens can sabotage your goals. So instead of starting what's wrong or missing or what hasn't worked, I want you to start with what has gone right. So go ahead and write these things down. You can pick any one of these or a few of these. Some of these, the better, right? But ask yourself and write down these things of, hey, what's been going great in life? What has gone right in the past year? What progress have you made? What progress have I made, even if it feels small? Which wins am I proud of? Who are the people that have shown up for me, and what qualifies what qualities or strengths have helped me along the way. And I want you to keep going until you feel the shift in your thinking, right? What we're doing here is reminding your mind of the progress that already exists. Because the truth is, what's wrong is always available, but so is what's right. And I totally stole that line from other people, but I'm going to tell you here, this is the shift in thinking, because we have to train ourselves to see what's right versus what's wrong, especially because we're often in a place where we're always solving problems. Because, when you start with what's right, your thinking opens up. You start designing from a place of possibility, not from deficiency. And I'm going to tell you a personal story on this part, which is I have had a performance coach for the last couple of years, and I can remember the calls that we've had where I was a new client. This was like, I think December of 2021. So a good 5 years ago now. And one of the things was that, it's like, bop, 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 how's it going? Before we start everything else, what is wonderful and what can we celebrate? And I was just like, motherfucking, just like, dude, like, I couldn't find the good things to celebrate because I was only thinking of big things. What are things noteworthy, right? What are things that I thought were big? But instead, even if it was hey, I got my steps in today. Hey, good things were I made the call to a family member. Hey, I had a really good talk at work. Hey, I really, it was awesome to have this good meeting. Whatever it was. Hey, I woke up this morning. And while it might seem like these are really small things, first of all, if you woke up this morning and you're alive and you're listening to this podcast, if you're thinking about your goals for next year, you got some really great things that you could, if you wanted to, notice that are going great. All right, let's be real. There's things to be grateful for. Could be, I'm really grateful for the phone that I have. I'm really grateful for, having a wonderful job. I'm really grateful for, if you had any answers that came from those questions that you wrote down, those are the things you start with, because even that becomes a habit. All right. So you have that. And so let's move to step 4. Ask yourself the bigger questions. This is where we move into where we start shifting into bigger visioning here. Only now, after you've created that space, shifted your state, seen what's going right, which, by the way, keep that list. Are you ready to think about your goals? And so I want you to ask the right questions. Not things like, what should I do? Not things like, what's realistic or what will other people think? None of that matters at this stage. Ask yourself powerful questions like, if next year went really well, really, really well, what would I want to be true? What are the things I would love to have? What are the things that I would love to do? Who are the people that I would love to do them with? What experiences matter most to me? And what changes would make my life better at the end of the year? And I want you to let your mind explore. Don't immediately filter through realistic or possible. Don't judge your own thoughts here. You need to let yourself imagine, right? This isn't about capturing your, things that you think are realistic. Capture your authentic wants, the things that come from a good state and a wide view of what's possible. And by the way, in a place like this, if you feel like your energy is starting to drop, jump up and down again. Have the music that really kind of gets that energy going. Because remember, it's all about having this come from a certain state. All right. So those are the things to be capturing at this point. Focusing on the questions of, what are things I would love to have? What are things I would love to do? Who are the people I would love to do them with? What experiences matter most? And what changes would make my life better at the end of the year? And by the way, what changes would be amazing to have in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. And the next step as we roll right into this, just capture everything. Don't edit, just write. Ask those questions, write everything down. It's not about judging what you're writing. It's not about the editing. It's not about the ranking. It's not about the organizing. Capture the outcomes you want, the experiences you want, the changes you want, the people you want to spend the time with, the things you want more of, and maybe the things you want less of as well. Maybe just write. Don't stop, don't censor, don't judge. At this stage, your only job is to capture. And that's how you get the clarity here. And here's something practical. If you're listening and you feel your energy dropping again, just keep getting that energy high again. All right. Get up, do something physical, move your body, get back the energy. Because when your energy shifts, your thinking shifts and you'll see things you didn't before. So your goals will change, your perspective will expand, and new ideas will come forward. All right. The step 6 here is think across your core life areas, right? Remember, like we talked about at the start, that when we're at this stage, first of all, nothing has to be perfect, right? We've captured what we've captured. If it's about having the awareness, and we want to think across some of these examples now that we have this list. Think about this. Look at some of the things you have. It could be across the work and career perspective, right? Think about it. Is there things you need to balance out? It could be from the income and investments perspective. Maybe there's some things on the work side of getting promoted or taking a role with more influence. Maybe it's, publishing some technical content, or maybe it's being a lead on a project. On the income perspective, maybe it's about automating savings and investing a percentage, or, thinking about you want an asset class you want to learn more about. Maybe you want to raise your financial IQ by studying things like tax optimization or an asset allocation or something like that. On the health and energy, maybe it's about consistently getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep and what you need to do to get there. Maybe it's you really want to do the 3 to 4 workouts the week and maybe adding some more mobility. Could be things on family and relationships. It could be things on time, freedom, and lifestyle. And the point about all this is that you want to focus around these different areas of your life. And so once you have this balanced out, you've captured a bunch of stuff, and you've looked at, well, what else could I want to add on these different categories. This is where we're really looking at how we could organize this a bit further. See what we're doing here? So you have this complete list of everything that you've wrote. By the way, you can always go back and add more, of course, but if you've asked those questions, you've pulled out a bunch of stuff in your head already. Okay, now that you have this complete list of everything that you wrote, now we can start looking at the actual time horizons, right? So we have a couple different options here. We have 1 year, we have 3 years, 5 years, and even 10 years. And what I want you to do is go to that list, and I want you to go through the list and add, one next to all of the lines that you would love to be able to do in 1 year. Go through that list again and put a 3 down to all the lines where you think, yeah, that would be 3 years. That would be good. And then go through the list, do 5 and then 10 again. And you can maybe move some things around, and maybe you have a lot of 1s that you might be okay with moving to 3s, and maybe some 3s that you think have to be pushed in 5s. But this will start to give you an idea of, again, in this way that, you have this list that you just kind of pulled out of your head, right? That you can see how all this starts looking in a time perspective. And it shows what matters soon, what matters a little bit later, maybe what might be a life theme. But none of this is a deadline. It's things that you can change around. Once you've done all that, now we can start making this a little bit more and more tactical. You can look at this list and say, if this is my 1 year set, all these things that are 1 year, you're going to circle all of those and say, hey, if this is my 1 year goals, what is one big move and one small move that can actually start me down this path, right? These help you to put things into actionable goals. That one big step, that one small step. And of course, what is the first action that I can take for all of those? So this is what you would do for all these 1 year goals. And really, this brings us to the end. This brings us to the end. From here, I'm sure that you can take the skills that you probably have already of, now that you have your 1 year goals identified, you can look at, well, what might I need to do at a quarterly basis? What are the actions that I would have to do consistently, maybe on a day by day or a week by week basis? That would be great to keep me going, right? Accountable, as an example. And so that is the point of this goal setting process. Oftentimes we get really good at the things that we can do week over week or daily and that kind of stuff. But really, the goal setting process here I wanted to focus on is what it looks like to think big, to think, that process, like I said, of getting in state, of asking the questions to focus on what will put us in a way where we're primed so that we can write all those things down that we want. And then that process of the 1, 3, 5, 10 type of thing. And so that's pretty much it from here, what I wanted to cover. There's a couple other things, of course, I've got to talk about, a couple ideas that will really help to make sure that you're able to do this as effective as possible. And the first one, and I've said this a couple times already, but I think this is one of the most important things to do, is make sure that you're setting these goals with higher energy, right? If you're tired or distracted or you're mentally flat, your goals are going to come out that way too. And you don't want to have these goals that are uninspiring or just, like, oh yeah, these are things that are logical, but you don't really care about. Remember, they've got to be emotionally connected. And so from here, I just want to give you a couple of tips to make sure that your goal setting is the most optimized that it can be. Optimized and the best that it can possibly be. And so I've said this a couple times through the episode, but I want to say this again here is that you want to be in the right state before you start, right? Your energy and your mindset shape the quality of your goals. So when you're tired, you're distracted or flat, you write small goals, uninspiring goals, and versus when you're energized physically and mentally, your goals reflect your vision and not just, what's in your mind and you feel like is logical. Right. And so when you stand up, you move, you breathe, you walk, you put on music, do whatever shifts your energy before you write anything. Right. Because if your goals sound flat, it's likely your state. It's not your ambition failing. So change your state first. Number two, start what's going right. Begin by writing down your wins, your progress, what's already going well. Heck, have a list. If you're listening to this right now and you're in your car or whatever, before you even get to your goal setting process, maybe just write down that list first so you can go right into it, right? So that you can go through asking yourself, you can skip to the part of, hey, I have this list of all these great things. Let me find other ways to get into state so that I can get this whole capture list of things that I really want, right? High performers are trained to notice problems, like I said, and that's what makes us really useful at work, right? But this same thing, the same skill becomes a double-edged sword, which can be really great at times, but not when you're trying to think big and vision into the future. So it narrows your thinking when you're goal setting. And so starting with the strengths and progress, and moving into things that have already been beneficial opens your brain to that possibility. So remember what's gone right this year, what progress am I proud of, who supported me, things like that. The other thing, this probably should be one on the list, but think about the things, these outcomes that you want more of, right? The results that you want first, right? The actions will come later. So think about what is it that you actually want more of? What is it going to give you when you make that investment and you get that income back? Tie it to those types of things that will make it more emotional for you. And so if you ever look at your list, maybe you've done this process and the next day you're like, this doesn't really resonate. I don't really care. A good idea would be, well, what is that really going to get me besides the money, right? Investing besides the money, what else is it going to get you? And then the other thing here is keep your list short and prioritized, right? We did the 1, the 3, the 5 to 10. So don't have too many 1-year things. Prioritize, right? Focus on a few big goals, not that long list for everything. You can have that list of that 3 and 5 and 10, etc. For you when you go do this process later on. It could be maybe around March or June or whatever on a quarterly basis, or for next year when you do this all over again. The list is yours, but do it in a way where you can focus on it, right? And focus on those few goals, not that list of everything. And so think about which goals, if I achieved, would make the most impact. When that will help you to think about which ones you should be focusing on this year. So with that in mind, um, I really hope this was useful. Like I said, this is something that I do. I've got a list that I went through myself as well, and there's more in this that I could definitely cover and share on. I've got some anti patterns and those kinds of things as well, but just want to share that framework. But I think with this, and before I close today, there's a couple things that I want to do as well in this upcoming year. And so I wanted to share those, which is I personally want to invest in 2 new funds this upcoming year. My goal is to invest, like I said, in 2 new funds in 2026. It is income diversification, not strictly chasing returns. These are funds that I want to be focusing on that have a proven track record, pay consistently, monthly cash flow. And what this is going to do for me, outcomes wise, is have more sources of predictable income, less dependence on a single source. And for me, this is the peace of mind knowing that my capital is working hard, even when I'm working hard in somewhere else, right? Even when I'm not. What I mean is like when I'm sleeping or taking rest, right? And so this isn't about more deals for me. It's about better structure and stability. The second part here is expand my reach and grow the platform intentionally, right? And this is something that I've been working on all year. And what I mean by this platform, I mean this podcast, right? I mean, this year I've invested in building a team. I have hired someone full time who's doing wonderfully. It's already paying off. And I want to scale the content and distribution more from there too, right? My goal is to have 1,000 YouTube subscribers by the end of 2026. And that means reaching more tech professionals, sharing lessons about investing, freedom, decision making, and building more trust at scale and not just the one-on-one conversations, which I love, but want to get this out to more people as well. So for me, that ties to mission. There's a whole other thing I could talk about here, but one of the things for me is how can I contribute even more, right? And have more fun and enjoy all of life's adventures. But for me, that's mission. I want to contribute more, and that means I need to become more and do more as well. Third is successfully kick off the capital raise, my next capital raise. This is one of my core professional goals is to launch and execute capital raise in 2026. Doing a lot of that work focused on in Q1. And for me, this represents growth as an investor and allocator, stepping more into responsibility and leadership in this space. Of course, create more opportunities for others to invest alongside me. And again, if you're picking this up here, it's not just financial. It's about doing things a way that I'm stepping more into my own identity, who I want to be, more alignment and discipline, and of course, long-term thinking as well, and doing it in a way that I thought is the quote unquote right way, but in a way also that's sustainable, not just let me go out there and do this and just completely, lose all the other areas of life, not ecological as an example. And I suppose that's also another good tip as well, is that when you look at your goals, make sure that they all work with each other. One area isn't going to overpower others. And so, yeah, that's what I have. Those three, I'm really excited about them. There's a lot of work to be done, but I'm ready. And so from here, I'm just going to close. If you take this one thing from this episode, let it be this: goals work best when they're clear, aligned, and revisited. They're not rushed. They're not just borrowed from someone else. They're specific to you, and they're meaningful. And so, if you want to stay connected with this kind of thinking, I send the Arita Capital newsletter every couple of weeks. It's where I share frameworks, questions, and lessons pulled from my own investing decision-making, of course, with people that are on the podcast as well from the guests. So you can head over to aritacapital.com, sign up there. And if you're working through your own goals right now, I hope this episode gave you a process that you can come back to throughout the year as well. Thanks so much. Happy holidays, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.